welcome. You're watching NewsX. I'm Meenakshi, Upreti. The top story of this bulletin, the raging hijab controversy. Amidst this row, the Ministry of External Affairs has issued a strong statement. The statement pertains to comments which are made by other countries, stating that the matter is under judicial examination by the Karnataka High Court and motivated comments on our internal issues are not welcome. The strong statement came after the US tried to wade into India's internal matters. Rashid Hussain, ambassador at large for international religious freedom, has tweeted, and I quote, "Hijab bans in schools violate religious freedom," unquote. Over the next 30 minutes, we will discuss who gave them the authority to comment on India's internal matters. Has the United States of America forgotten its own issues? Has it forgotten its slave-owning history or what it did to the native? Let's discuss this in further detail, the hijab row and why these foreign powers are meddling in our internal affairs. Is this really an attempt to fan the fire which is already raging in our country? I'd like to welcome my panel of experts, starting with Ambassador Deepak Vora. He's a former diplomat. Also, Preeti Upala, editor of The Observer and geopolitical analyst. She's joining us from California, USA. Also joining us is Rubinder Sachdev. He's an international affairs expert. And also joining us is our in-house expert, Professor Madhav Nalapad. He is editorial director of the Sunday Guardian. Starting first of all with you, Ambassador Vora. Sir, how do you react to this strong statement which has been now issued by the Ministry of External Affairs? Rightly so, the MEA has told US and all other foreign powers really to stay out of our internal affairs. And if you look at it, sir, this happened in one institute where the whole debate is about discipline and dress code. Would you say that foreign powers are now blowing it out of proportion? And how do you assess the reaction of the MEA? Do you think that a strong statement is enough, or is there something more which the MEA can do to drive home the point, to tell these foreign powers once and for all, stay out of it? This is a democratic country. We've got our courts. The court is looking into the matter. And finally, in a country like ours, we follow amicably what the judiciary says, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Always a pleasure to be with you, to be on NewsX at this time, to be with Ms. Upala, with Mr. Sachdev, and of course, the inimitable Professor Madhav Nalapad. Always an honor and a pleasure to learn from you. You know that since 2013, the 1st of February, I just found out is World Hijab Day, an annual event set up by a Bangladeshi-born woman who migrated to New York. Now, all over the world, the Islamic world, the age at which girls start covering their head, usually around the time they hit puberty, has been falling, causing some kind of pushback by secularists. When I was in school and college, Professor Nalapad Bemia, only my Sikh fellow students wore turbans. No one else wore the skull cap or the hijab or any other headgear. Now, when you've talked about this gentleman, I beg your pardon, from the United States, he's some ambassador of large. Obviously, his intelligence is not very large, but he's talked about the state of Karnataka should not be interfering in such matters, and it's a question of religious freedom. Similarly, I'm told that the Pakistanis have waded into this whole thing, saying, you know, we can see that this is not secular and not democratic. Pakistan telling us this, kahavat ulta chor kotwal ko dante. India's Minister for Minority Affairs has shot back, saying that Pakistan is a jungle of crime and cruelty for minorities, shouldn't be preaching to us. You know, ma'am, maybe we should have a World Hypocrisy Day with Pakistan as the president for life of World Hypocrisy Day. Now, the MEA has come out with a very strong statement. Even as, I remind you, ma'am, even as in Australia, a fellow called Blinken was huddled with our foreign minister and talked lovely things about how we'll go forward together, etc., etc., etc. Then we have this nonsense coming. May I just suggest that this ambassador at large should be ignored We have made a strong statement, and as and when the time comes, we'll take the next step. If anybody casts aspersions on the independence of India's judiciary, I would ask that person to look at the number of times when Indian courts, including the Supreme Court of India, have ruled against the government. What more proof do they want?
And that has happened time and again, sir, very rightly pointed out. And in a democracy like ours, finally, the final word really in such complicated matters lies with the judiciary. And whatever the courts decide will be followed amicably. We have of course, a legal system. Anyone is free to go to a Supreme Court, a higher court, and seek, of course, a legal recourse. Preeti Upala, since you're joining us from the US, the question I had for you was, would it be okay for the US government if India started commenting on the internal affairs of the United States of America when the Black Lives Movement happened, when you had massive protests which were raging in the US? India had chosen in a very calibrated and careful manner to stay out of the affairs of US. The history of the United States of America also doesn't seem to be, it's not like US is holier than thou and that, going by their history, they can point fingers at India. Really, given the scenario that India generally has chosen not to interfere in internal affairs of other countries, would you assess that it's fair that you have something like the IRF, which is now commenting on the hijab row, which is raging in our country?
Well, namaste, Ms. Upreti. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It's always a pleasure to be on your wonderful show. Well, maybe we should start commenting, because trust me, there is plenty to comment about. I think the whole world can see that. But in moving on to more serious matters, there's two parts to this whole saga. One is the actual issue itself. And look, India is the largest secular democracy in the world, and if it says it's truly secular, then it needs to act like a secular country, which means it can't appease any religious community, whether that happens to be minority or majority. Of course, all religions are protected and everybody has the right to freely practice whatever faith they are of, and that's always been the case with India, thankfully. But it also means that you have the same laws for all. So one law for everyone. And I think the government of India needs to make this really important decision, separate education from religion. Educational institutions are there to educate, to inform, and to raise upright citizens. You need to leave religion out of it. So that's one thing. That's for the government to do. Now, for the matter as far as the US commenting, anytime, it seems like these days, anything interesting happens in India, the international media has nothing better to do. Even in a global pandemic, they have to jump at it. Sometimes it's amusing, sometimes it's a bit disingenuous. It's getting a bit old sometimes. But I really think that this is truly an internal matter of India. It has its own laws. It's a definition of secularism is very different to what it is in France or Europe, where it originates, right? So I think what will work for France will not work for India. By the way, the burqa is banned in most European countries. It is not banned in India. So, we are actually quite
and rightly so. And that was going to be my next question. Rabinder Sachdev, if you could come in here. I'd just like to take this thought forward. In India, we have 1 or 2 educational institutes which have spoken about the validity of hijab inside the premises of those institutes. This is also in relation to dress code and discipline as far as a school goes. That's a separate debate. But as far as a hijab ban is concerned, it's almost laughable. You have so many European countries, from France, of course, you have Switzerland, even neighboring Sri Lanka, where a full face veil is banned altogether. So why is it that India is being singled out, sir?
I would not go deep into it other than commenting a couple of points. I see, apart from everything else, little cause of worry also. This thing now that, sure, all religions are equal. Let's have it. Would it mean that the Sikhs cannot wear their turbans to schools now? That would be my, real worry. irrespective of whatsoever comes out. Of course, I mean, there'll be some distinctions made.
Right.
But that aside, I'll come back to the topic of the day today that you have. You know, this Commission on Religious Freedom, what right does it have to comment? Who gave it the right? You know, no one. The US took it. It is their megaphone. So how we counter it is, we have to create our own megaphones. Fine, okay, our MEA denying this and, you know, giving a strong answer back is fine and cool. Okay, yeah. But we have to create our own megaphone, our own voice in this world. Why can we not have a World Commission on Integral Humanism and Peace?
Fair enough.
Okay, which every year evaluates all countries on the parameters of, you know, equity and peace and social harmony, etc.
All
That's
right.
what we need. That's what we need. That's one. Secondly, yes,
Okay.
within the US, as Preeti was also saying, I mean, US has its own, you know, imperfections. Every nation is imperfect. I mean, why go into the past? Look at the Black Lives Movement,
Yeah.
right? I mean, in fact, we were running some courses on tolerance and kindness, etc., to bridge some gaps. We were running some programs. So the US has its own warts also. India can really be a good voice, a sane voice for the world of today.
Okay.
India needs to be that.
All right. So you've touched upon 2 points. One, of course, as far as, you know, wearing hijabs is concerned, yes, it is, of course, very tricky waters really to model in when you have, of course, you know, Sikh students who wear a turban. Is it okay or not okay for Muslim women to wear hijab, or is it about discipline? That, of course, is a separate debate. But yes, as of now, the topic in hand, we'll come to, of course, the part of hijab as well. But Professor Madhav Nalapad, if I could just draw you back into what Rubinder Sachdev was saying. Far as the US is concerned, sir, the US also has its imperfections. Many other countries which are now pointing fingers at India have their own imperfections. When India chooses to stay out of their personal affairs, when India chose to maintain a dignified silence, even at the peak of Black Lives Matter movement, which was raging, rampaging across United States, would you not say today that it's quite unbecoming that you have an institute in the US which is pointing fingers, even questioning our secular credentials over a matter which pertains to one educational institute? It's not like India has banned hijab, and countries which have banned hijab altogether, countries like France, for example, which say we're not even going to allow women who wear a hijab to play sports professionally. The US is silent on that.
Well, look, I'd like to say that the Indian policy, long-standing policy of not commenting adversely, certainly, on other countries, is a policy that is not followed by any other major country in the world. Now, we can work hard at trying to convince all the other countries to follow our example. And I quite agree we should continue with our example rather than, you know, follow the example of every other major country. Having said that, I'd like to say also, let me say, I don't believe the hijab or the niqab or the burqa are essentially religious in nature, for the simple reason that they were there around 2000 years ago. That is much before the Prophet revealed the divine verses that he was told. So it's not really, I mean, it's not a part of the religion as such. But having said that, I'd like to point out that in my view, this particular hijab ban by this institution, for whatever the motive, it must be the purest of motives, but the reality is it's a self-goal. I'll tell you why. First of all, the hijab is not the niqab. We are talking about full face coverings. That's a niqab. A full covering is a burqa. Now, that's very different from a hijab, which is a headscarf. And frankly, I mean, whether you wear a hijab, or you wear a saffron shawl, or you wear a blue shawl, or a yellow shawl, personally, it is perfectly compatible with a school uniform. I really don't see why the school should go to that level of detail. Then tomorrow it will tell you what color shoes to wear or slippers to wear. So I would like to say it's a self-goal. And one, it has given an opportunity for anti-India forces led by the Sino-Wahhabi alliance to go and say, nonsensical things about India and intolerance based on this decision taken by a single school establishment.
Yeah.
And secondly, Karnataka is an important state for international investment. Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, nowadays UP, these are important states for international investment. Let me tell you that this controversy is not going to help Karnataka at all in attracting investment. So in my view, it's a complete, I would like to end by saying,
Okay.
look, if some extremist organizations provoked the wearing of the hijab, well, banning it has played into their hands. Because after you allow that, then they will move on to the niqab and the burqa. At that stage, you stop them. You say, no, hijab is fine, but no niqab, no burqa. 99% of Muslim women will stand with you.
Well,
Whereas
absolutely.
the hijab, even many Hindu women say, what's the problem in wearing a headscarf?
Yeah. And I think you put it rightly, sir. It really is a self-goal. This is a very avoidable controversy, and by letting it fester, would you also agree, Ambassador Vora, that we have allowed nations like Pakistan, nations like China, which are acting inimical to our interests, this unnecessary controversy has given them an impetus at the end of the day? Look, you have Shah Mahmood Qureshi, no locus standi on the matter. As you rightly said, a country like Pakistan, almost laughable that today they are speaking of secularism when they themselves stand for blasphemy laws, when they themselves, of course, have been completely silent on what's happening in Xinjiang. Would you say, sir, that these unnecessary controversies also, while we are today, it's right that we are criticizing this sort of meddling by foreign powers, but we also have to look inwards and realize that by letting a controversy like this fester, we have given ammunition to our adversaries also, sir, isn't it?
What you've said and what Professor Madhav Nalapat said is spot on. You've talked of a raging controversy. I would consider it more rage than controversy. It's an unnecessary storm in a teacup. Perhaps it could have been handled differently. I'm sure that the Honorable High Court will come out with an appropriate decision, because we as Indians, ma'am, it's our ethos. Discussion, negotiation, compromise. That is the method that we adopt. We never try to ram anything down anybody's throat. Not that we have too many throats to ram too many things down. Now, there's one question I have, and I'd be happy if any of the panelists could answer it. For some African tribes, and I've served half my career in Africa, going around without clothes is the norm, part of their culture. Should they be allowed to come to Western schools without clothes, in the nude? I wonder what the Pakistanis or whoever this religious freedom character is, what they would have to say. It's an interesting question. It begs an answer.
And let me take that forward. You know, Preeti Upala, you also spoke about secularism. You spoke about how education and religion should not be mixed. That, of course, is a larger debate, something which India is mulling on, is thinking about. But again, it's a smaller controversy. This is literally about headscarves, which girls should or should not wear inside of an educational institute. What would you say about the silence which countries like the US have maintained on perhaps, say, France, on other European countries which have banned headscarves, which have banned a full veil? We even have our neighboring Sri Lanka, which does not allow full veils at most public places. Do you not see some sort of hypocrisy here on the part of US and other Western countries which are today criticizing India but are silent on France?
Yeah, I mean, the way that the West works is it picks the topics and the nations from which it can get the maximum impact. And it seems that India is, really the perfect storm in any way, because one could say, oh, there's 200 million Muslims there, so any issue to do at all with that particular religion is, the whole world is watching eagerly to see, and they get outraged they get triggered very, very quickly. So this narrative is being spun. We don't do a good enough job of countering it and sort of informing and educating the world, which we really should be doing. I think the West will not change. It is what it is. I think that's what made America great. It continues to make America great. I think we need to sort of be the best that we can be, because we're an ancient civilization with so much wisdom, and I think we need to be wiser about the battles that we pick diplomatically and in this way.
I agree. India needs to be. Sorry, I'm interrupting you here. I agree with you that India needs to be very particular about the battle it picks. But Rabinder Sachdev, would you say at this point of time, yes, we can have our differences on hijab, on whether women should be allowed to wear hijab inside an educational institute or not. But when you have these foreign powers which are unnecessarily needling us, what should India do? Is this sufficient, issuing a strong statement? Because we've seen many times the Indian government criticize foreign powers, criticize other countries on attacking us on so-called quote-unquote Hindu phobia, etc. But when it comes to really meddling in our affairs, other than issuing a strong statement, what can the Indian government do?
I will repeat one part what I mentioned in my previous part. The Indian government should set up some kind of a prestigious forum or agency which would say that this agency rates the world peace and social harmony. It funded very well, and every year come out and see what's happening. And see, this is not with a view of vengeance. It's much more with a view of offering maybe solutions or guidance or wisdom of India, right? To solve issues maybe within the US on the Black lives, or in Africa some issues, or even in Pakistan, Indonesia, okay, or even in the Middle East and whatever, etc. We have to create a platform, a megaphone. Narratives, otherwise these will keep coming, we'll keep denying. But you know what? Who is setting the agenda? We are only reacting. We need to have our own platforms. That is one. Secondly, absolutely, as has been said, this was perhaps a very unnecessary controversy also. Brilliant point. I mean, what is a hijab? Right.
Yeah.
And answering, Ambassador Vora's question that if somebody in some tribal cultures, they choose to dress in a way, will you off? See, bottom line, all democracies, and we will have to learn to live and let live. We will have to do that. Each country will come to its own equilibrium of that, but that is where we are headed, and that's where we should be going with least amount of conflict and divisiveness.
Right.
So that's what we have to do within our own country, and that's what we have to actually convey to the world also. Ukraine and Russia, guys, come on, live and let live. Push back.
Right, push back, and that's something which India should look at. Professor Nalapad, would you agree, just taking Rabinder Sachdev's thought forward, do you think that as of now in India, there is also a need for a committee? When we say that let's form a committee on secularism, religious affairs, would you say that a committee of Muslim women, not men, not those who decided, Muslim personal law, just women who can come together and talk about reforms which are needed within the community? Because reforms in a community cannot be imposed. Sati system, the Parda system, many of course were rejected by Hindus, but this was driven by scholars from within the community itself. Would you say that right now, as we on NewsX also have been talking about for the last 2-3 days, is a need to form a committee of the women belonging to minority committee who could look really at issues which are of course affecting the community, and let women become the author of their narrative, of their community, without any meddling from any government or educational institute. Perhaps that would be a dignified end to this controversy, sir?
I'd like to say I have never been a believer in the efficacy of committees.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this committee would work. And secondly, I'm totally opposed setting up a committee on the ground of the religion of a person. In India, we have suffered enough because of this absurd two-nation theory. Pakistan and China are working hard to try and convince the population of India that Hindus and Muslims are two separate nations, trying to recreate the situation in the 20s and 1930s and 1940s. An absurd proposition. There's no difference between a Hindu or a Christian or a Muslim. Anyway, I mean, it is correct that in the United States there is no difference. In the UK, there's no difference. And by the grace of God, In India, there's no difference. Having said that, I'd like to say that, I am a fairly strong acquaintance with Karnataka. It's one of the most wonderful states of the Union, a really enlightened state. And I'd like to say that what has happened, a dress that was a hijab, frankly, maybe, these 5 or 6 girls were incentivized by some outside force. Possibly, I don't know. But then the point is that by banning almost every girl in that community, in that educational institution, now wants to wear the hijab.
Yeah.
We've gone and triggered that. The quickest way to mainstream a practice is to ban it. Once you ban something, you are mainstreaming. I know, for example, my uncle Aubrey Menon, his was the first book banned in free India. And frankly, book bans make no sense.
Yeah.
So the point is very simple. This is a very dangerous path to tread on. I don't believe the hijab is such a important part. It destroys the uniform or discipline or law and order. It has not, done that. And I think that this college was unwise in trying to impose it. And may I point out, tomorrow, if a section of students says we should not wear a bindi, or a section of students in a particular college say that a girl student should not come in a sari, what are we going to say? Oh, this is a sari is a religious dress, a bindi is a religious dress.
Right.
The reality is it need not be. So please, my point is, these are sensitive matters. I fully support a ban on the niqab. I fully support a ban on the burqa. But as far as the hijab is concerned, in my opinion, frankly, it is a complete self-code.
All right. Far as bans are concerned, again, sir, to differ with you here, I'm not too sure if bans work for any sort of dress for any community. But yes, end of the day, it was an unnecessary controversy, something which could have been avoided. But again, as we close this discussion, it's an integral matter of India. India is a democracy. The judiciary is looking at the matter. The word of the judiciary will be acceptable amicably to all the parties. If not, we have, of course, a redressal system which is available in India. And perhaps it's in background and context of that the Ministry of External Affairs has issued such a strong statement. Hopefully, it will act as a deterrent for all those foreign powers who are now trying to sermonize us, who are now trying to make these motivated comments and meddle in our internal affairs. Your meddling, your comments on our internal affairs, not welcome. Bottom line, that's the message which India has given today. Far as the hijab is concerned, that is a raging controversy, and we will continue that debate through the day on the channel. But as of now, I'd like to thank all our experts for joining us with their views on this broadcast.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.